Hi, everyone. Welcome to our January office hour. We're going to give it around 2 minutes to allow everyone to join. I'm going to proactively mute you, but of course, you can come off of mute at any time to ask questions.
Let me get a couple things up and then I'll share my screen.
Perfect.
So how much snow did you all end up getting?
We ended up getting like at least 3 inches, I think, and it's supposed to not get above freezing. So tonight it's looking like it might freeze again. So schools were canceled today, and I think they'll probably be canceled the rest of the week. My friend's a first grade teacher, and she was like, it's not looking like we'll have school because North Carolina shuts down.
Snowpocalypse.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we have a
In
few other.
South Louisiana, we had over 10 inches for the first time since 1978.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh
Like
my goodness.
the bridges are said to be closed till maybe Friday. Baton Rouge is shut down. Like they can't, we don't have equipment to deal with this. It just doesn't happen.
Right. That is wild. Oh my goodness.
Be safe.
Well, it
Yeah.
was on the news here that they were bringing in like 15 trucks from like all over for Louisiana to be able to scrape like Baton Rouge area and stuff. Like that's crazy. At least you got to play in some snow. Danny, did you make a snowman?
I'm at our other office in North Louisiana, and it was just a blue, sunny, sunshiny day. We missed like I, I got left out the whole fun show.
That's not fun.
All right, we can go ahead and get started because I know this is just supposed to be an open office hour. We do have some topics to go over, and we'll start with the agenda, but we really want this to be focused on any questions that you all have that you want to go over. And I know that everyone on this call will benefit from that. Um, So we'll go over a few topics, and then we'll go over some accounting or not accounting tips. We're going to go over advanced accounting tips. We're also going to talk about daily entry on our knowledge base just to make sure there's no questions on that. And then we're going to facilitate an open Q&A. You can feel free to come off of mute to ask questions. And George and I will also be looking at the chat for any questions submitted there. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first two topics we wanted to cover, and then we'll open up the floor for anything else that's top of mind.
Definitely. Thanks, Katie. So I have prepared just some overall good information that some people may not be aware of. So wanted to first just look at some of the accounting tips and definitely covering items related to AP Inbox that a lot of people aren't as familiar with. Also focusing on invoice approvals, some bank sync and group reconciliation mappings, a lot of things that our support team will find when they're helping, resolve any tickets is that some people might not be using this functionality. So making sure that you are aware of the functionality that is available, just because some of these little things can make a big difference. First thing I wanted to point out is every location within accounts payable in your AP inbox, you do have your own specific email address. So each hotel in their invoice, the AP side, does have their own email address. And we always recommend you saving this as a contact in your phone. That way, if you're a GM or an owner and you're walking around or driving around and traveling, if you're checking rooms and you get an invoice in your email, you can simply click forward it to the contact that you have saved on the phone. And that way it'll populate in your AP inbox right away. It usually comes in within just a matter of a few seconds. So just give it a little bit of time and then it should populate with no issues there. And I have an example. So something that I had in my inbox, I clicked forward and I sent it in. And you can see just within a couple seconds, it does populate with the person that sent it. And then it also has like the file name of what was sent. In the AP inbox, there's two ways to look at this screen. You can either look at it on the table view, which is what I'm showing now, or there is a gallery view. So on the top right, there's a little gear icon, and this will tell you, either just gives you a picture of the invoice, which sometimes people might find to be helpful to help clarify like what vendors or what invoices are what. So you are able to change that using this gear icon. And then whatever your personal preference is, go ahead and make sure you save it as your default view. That way, every single time it will automatically populate in here. So again, going back, your email address is on the top right. If you do have access to multiple hotels, as you change each hotel on the top left, it will update the email address. Some other best practices people have found is actually adding this email address into your vendor profiles. So then that way when your vendor automatically sends the email or that invoice, that it will automatically populate in your AP inbox. So that way you don't have to actually click forward. It will just automatically populate in here. In those scenarios, if the vendors are emailing these invoices, it's likely that they will email a statement. Typically do not recommend paying invoices off of a statement. So if you do have anything that does populate in here, you can click the triple dot menu over here and you can delete it. So if it's something that will not be used to actually enter, then you can delete it from your invoice inbox if you do not need that. Going through, touch base on that. All right, so some other items that we wanted to cover is invoice approvals and extraction. So recently, if you've used the invoice extraction feature, when it first rolled out or within the last 6 to 9 months, there have been a lot of improvements that have been made to the invoice extraction feature. So when it was first rolled out, it did a good job of reading like the first page, but actually now you can upload and you can read multiple pages. So I discovered this when I was training. So in here, you can see we have a US Foods invoice. This invoice is 5 pages. Again, wasn't as quite as user-friendly as it was before, but now we've made some changes within the last few months that it's super easy to utilize. So the invoice extraction feature, what this is where it's actually reading the invoice and it can do a lot of the coding for you. This does require that advanced accounting level. So if you don't see this feature, then reach out to us and we can get you more information on that. So what the invoice extraction does is after you've entered the vendor name and you click extract, it's going to ask you how many pages you want to extract. So if you see, if I come in here and click all 4 of these, don't really need the 5th page, it's just a signature. So I'm going to leave that out. And when I click extract, what it's going to do is it's going to start reading it and it will start to populate some of the information for us. The cool thing about invoice extraction is that it will start to remember what chart of accounts you're using for these different descriptions. So in here, like the next time I purchase bananas, if I've coded that to your complimentary breakfast line item, it will automatically code those. So the invoice extraction is a huge game changer when it comes to the invoice entry because it's a lot less of that manual entry and it remembers where it went. It's reading a lot of pages, so give it a second. So in this scenario, what it did is it read everything. If I come up here and maybe something didn't get put in the right place, maybe your invoice number is pulling a customer number. The very first time that you extract invoices, you do need to let Inflow know what information goes where. So by clicking onto that mapping section, you can see this is the inflow information, and this is what it's reading from the invoice. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit because that might be helpful to see. So ideally, the invoice number, we want the invoice number, and you can see what is pulling in to possibly be matched. So we're pulling in the invoice number, we have the invoice date. It gives you a preview of what is pulling in. The total amount, you can see if I click on that, we're looking for the 1918. So if I scroll down to the last page, we're looking for something that says this amount. And that's why this description shows that way. So not only will it tell you the mapped field, but it'll also give you a preview of like, hey, if you pick this up, this is what will populate. So obviously I wouldn't want to pick up like the total adjustment because that's not the total of the invoice. So it does give you a preview of what you are importing when you're doing this initial mapping. Also scrolling down here, we can see the different line items. So this is where it's picking up each of the different items that are on the invoice. That's why we have so much information from this invoice. So it's picking up the description, and what page is picking it up off of. So you can see if we go to description, it's picking it up off of all 4 pages. I want to make sure I select the same thing for all 4 pages here. So a lot of, especially for this vendor, they call this the extended price. So what I'm going to want to do is I make sure I pick up the extended price for all 4 pages. So if I come down here and I type in extended price, you can see we have 4 options, and this is where I'm going to select each of these. So as soon as I save that, it's going to populate the information and put it into the correct bucket that it belongs into. What I just did there, I only have to do for US Foods 1 time. The next time I were to use this same vendor, it's going to remember where all of the mappings were, and it will automatically put everything where it belongs. So I know you're thinking, this is a lot of items. Are you really expecting me to enter this chart of account like 45 times? Absolutely not. Because I know for this invoice, just glancing through, all of this is breakfast items. Just making sure it is. Yep. So for that scenario, we have a multi-select. So if I know all of these go to comp breakfast, I can select this chart of account. I can do assign. And I'm going to select that comp breakfast chart of account. So as soon as I save this, the system's going to remember where we've coded this. And if I have multiple comp breakfast items or invoices to enter, excuse me, the next invoice, if I've coded that item already, is going to remember that chart of account. So the chart of accounts that you're going to have to select will get less and less because it is going to do that remembering of where it was coded to previously. This invoice is still comparing the invoice total amount to what you have expense down here. And so obviously with this, we have a couple more manual edits to make. We have a credit, and then we also have some fuel surcharge and sales tax. So this is outside of the typical invoice details, so you will need to manually update that. You'll find this a lot with like HD supply invoices. If there's sales tax, you'll have to manually add that to the chart of account above, but you had to do that anyways. So anything that's going to pull in with the description and then just update it accordingly to make sure this matches what the total of the invoice is. I'm going to show you another invoice with the invoice extraction. Again, if we're going to HD supply, here's the vendor name. Here's how it has pulled in the description for this vendor. Once we use that invoice extraction and code this invoice, the next time I go to purchase my Johnson Baby Care, it will remember that I coded this to guest supplies. And so the coding of the invoices is going to get less and less. My favorite is when we utilize this with like the Marriott invoices because it's a lot of the same description. So again, the only time that you'll have to manually update is if you have a new line item that pulls in that has not been coded before. This is vendor specific. So if you do have multiple hotels and it's just one vendor, it's going to remember that for all of the locations. So it's going to get less and less the more that you use it. If you do have full service and select service that code food items different places, I recommend having 2 different US Foods. So one that's applied to just the full service and one that's for the select service, because their items will be coded differently depending on the food aspect of it. I'm going to see if we have any questions related to that. Danny will have to follow up on that. We'll have to look into that. All right, so just covered a little bit of items in relation to the invoice extraction and as well as the email address related to the invoices. Another thing I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is down here at the very bottom on advanced accounting, if you do have AP settings, this is a way to add in additional invoice approvals. So right now when invoices get entered, it goes into the standard approval like you all were used to doing, and it can approve those. What if you have like another person that wants to be reviewing any invoices that over, a certain amount? So I'm going to just type in an invoice amount. So maybe as an owner, anything that possibly is over $20,000, I want them to also approve it. That way there's no, hey, why did you make this purchase? They are aware of it if it's something that they have to approve. So whether you want to set that threshold by a specific invoice amount, maybe certain vendors, if you have a contractor that you're working with any renovation and you want another layer of approval, you can do that. Department, maybe you want your F&B manager to approve anything that's coded to a food and beverage department. You can do that. Most popular one that we see is the invoice amount. So earlier I said if an invoice is over $20,000, I want someone else to approve it. Maybe I'll do my owner. And if I save that, after I've entered that and saved that invoice rule, any invoice that's over that amount will require a dual approval. The dual approval will show up in the invoice approval stage. And you'll have showing two different people that have to approve that. So that's just additional settings that are in the invoice approvals for the advanced accounting. A couple other things that I wanted to look at is the group reconciliation mappings. So kind of focusing on accounting today. Again, something that we typically see when we're out supporting people is making sure that we're utilizing our group reconciliation. What I mean by that is majority of the time you have your Visa and MasterCard deposits that come in together. Sometimes you might have other bank accounts where it's Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. POSs can be a little different. So if you typically are the one that's reconciling the bank account, then you typically are clicking group reconcile. You're adding these deposits together, which is kind of crazy to do this every single time you come in here. We had developed quite some time ago, but again, not something that a lot of people are aware of, the group reconciliation mappings, which will pull them together every single time. It just really helps with the reconciliation to be able to see those group deposits automatically. So for this hotel, if I click on this reconciliation mappings, I'm going to go into deposit grouping, and I'm going to put my Discover and Visa MasterCard. If you didn't have Discover, you could simply just do Visa MasterCard, but a lot of times it's either Discover is with Visa or not. So I'm going to select those three and create the group. I know when people aren't doing it because you can see that group reconcile button that was here is gone away. So anytime I get in here and I see a group reconcile button here, I know that people are not utilizing this feature. It gets very frustrating because this feature just makes so much of a difference when you are reconciling your bank accounts. So please make sure that your team is setting up this group reconciliation mappings. That way they don't have to click on and group them every single time. If you have additional deposit types that come in together, you can set up multiples of these. So if I want to add another group, maybe my American Express comes in with my POS Amex. Go ahead and click create group. You do have to set this per bank account just because each hotel can be a little different. But once you do it one time, you don't have to do this ever again. So as soon as I do that, if I click on my Visa, right now it's separated because that's just how it was set up. And as soon as I toggle that on, from now on, when I open this page, it will have one deposit per day. So huge, huge benefit for any team member that is reconciling the account to be able to set those group reconciliation mappings. This feature also plays a part in the bank sync. So if you aren't on advanced accounting, what the bank sync is it pulls in your bank transactions from the bank and compares it to those in inflow. So if you are on the bank sync, so that way it's pulling in transactions daily. This allows you to reconcile your bank account on a more frequent basis. So it's going to pull in those transactions on a nightly basis. It's going to be able to find those matches. So if you do have the group deposit set up, it's going to find your Visa MasterCard with your Visa MasterCard from the PMS. So unfortunately, I don't have any screenshots of bank sync because Didn't want to show anyone's pages, can't do that. But if it is something that you want more information on, we do have some knowledge base articles that show that. Other benefits of BankSync is that if you have multiple different banks, maybe some with Truist, some with Chase, rather than having to actually log into each of those banks and pull that bank activity, on a more frequent basis, depending on when you're reconciling, having the BankSync feature live allows you to consolidate that information and pull it all into Inflow. So that way, instead of having to log into each one, you have everything that all comes into a single location of Inflow, and they can reconcile their bank accounts on a much more frequent basis. This also allows you to find any discrepancies in deposits more frequently. I know if it's February 10th and I'm reconciling January and I have a variance from January 2nd, the likelihood of me having the time to go in and research that deposit isn't quite so much. Whereas if I was reconciling on a more frequent basis, I would call the GM, hey, your deposit from a few days ago is different. Did you have an adjustment? Be able to clarify that with any questions that you may have. So BankSync feature just definitely allows you to reconcile those discrepancies on a much more frequent basis. A couple other small items wanted to point out is down here in the bottom left-hand corner is the help section. This will take you to the knowledge base. So in here, if I have that open already, one of the main things that I know our team uses, especially during implementation, is the daily activity section. So if you all have a PMS that is not integrated, please reach out to the support team and let's get you on board so that way it is importing. I know we have a couple people that are in test stage of Cloudbeds, so that one will be available with this article once that's live. If you have a PMS that is not on this list, let our support team know so that way our integrations team can start working on that one. But within this section of daily activity, there's a couple different articles. There's one, how to set up the files to be automatically emailed. For any reason, if the import failed and you need to manually import, which just happens frequently, especially as PMSs get updated, majority of these, you have the ability to download the files directly from the PMS and import. That way, no one's hand keying anything in. Please do not hand key any daily activity in, especially if an integration is already live. Also, if there is an integration in Point, you can add additional auto email reports. So yes, for PEP, where currently we accept 4 files, if you wanted to send additional reports, like maybe a guest ledger detail or a city ledger detail, you can also send those reports to that same email address. If you do that, it will populate in the daily activity in the upload docs, so you can reference that. So just FYI, if you wanted to email additional reports, you do have the ability to do that. If there's any questions related to setting up PMS integrations, definitely just reach out to the support team. Want to make sure that people are on an integration as much as possible and avoiding any of that room for error with manual entry. Another location that you can utilize in here is if you are a new GM or you have like a new manager that may have started. We do have a tab in here for Inflow Academy where we've put our most popular training material, for a general manager, labor management life cycle. So in here we have just a training guide for labor management with just initial forecasting. So it kind of goes in step by step. In labor management, you have to learn how to forecast before you can do the schedule, and then going into further detail. So it's arranged in a way for them to walk through each training material one by one to be able to get up to speed. Same thing in accounting. We do have the Inflow Academy for general managers in the accounting side, in the general manager, as well as the accounting team and other miscellaneous articles. So everyone, if you have an Inflow login, you have access to this knowledge base to be able to reference any of these training materials. If you're like, I don't really know what I'm looking for, I just want to know how to add a bank account. The home button is where you can click on or you can type in what you're looking for. It'll kind of do a search for everything and be able to take you directly to that article. If there's anything in here that you're not able to utilize, or maybe you're like, this article is outdated, or you have some input, please, there is a section down here at the bottom. There you go. To say whether it's helpful or not. The more feedback we have on these, the more improvements we can make. So if there is anything that you want to give your feedback on, you can easily do that by clicking yes or no. All right, I think that was the majority of some of the tips that we wanted to cover today. Some of the other resources we will provide as far as advanced accounting and advanced accounting features, as well as that training material that we just covered. So we'll send out those links. Wanted to definitely circle back on the knowledge base, making sure everyone is aware of the daily activities section. So that way, if you are not fully integrated yet, it's something that will walk you through those steps. If you are setting up daily activity for the first time, make sure you reach out to the support team, because internally we do need to set the hotels to that PMS to be able to support the correct files. So the support team does have the ability to say, hey, my Hilton is on PEP. Can you please activate it? They can do that, and then you can walk through the steps to get that automatically set up. We've had a couple of people that went unmute. Feel free to kind of open the floor, ask any questions that you have related to accounting or labor management as a focus today. If you don't have a microphone, you can use chat to answer your questions on that. Anyone have any questions or anything that you want a clarification on? I know a lot of these names on this. Y'all are making it way too easy. Come on.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Patrick Harrington from Peace and Plenty.
Hey.
Question, do you have all, I know that obviously we are with Cloudbeds and we're trying to do an integration for the PMS to Inflow. Do you also offer integrations for POS systems for on our food and beverage side to pull
Not
in
right
that daily
now.
activity?
But that is something that I'm begging the product team to be able to support. So if you have a list of the point of sale, which one do you guys use, Patrick?
Lightspeed.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely on the list. Toast is on the list as well. We have a lot of hotels that have kind of transitioned over to Toast. So we can see where that is and get that in for the feedback section. We currently do have the ability to accept 2 sets of data because we have a lot of hotels that are dual branded. It would just building the integration with the POS. So we'll jot that down and make sure we get that on the list. That's one of the POS systems to integrate with.
Great, thank you. Then how would that work if we get integrated with Cloudbeds so that it's pulling in the daily activity from the PMS? Then we would have to manually input still the POS data?
Correct. So as of right now, if it imported just the PMS, then you would wait for that import to work, and then you would add the point of sale data on top of it. And then once the integration works, it'll accept both sets of information.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Danny mentioned having a POS storage commander. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Danny?
On our main entity, we have hotels, but on the main entity, we also run storage facilities.
Oh, okay.
And we're having a hand key in like all of that stuff. And Storage Commander does offer like a XML export. It's just like what the thing it pumps out is just, it looks almost identical to what Opera's doing to see if instead of us having a hand key in 300 rooms, 300 storage rooms, it's almost like it looks just like a hotel or database. Like the report at the end of the day is just like a hotel. And that would save us a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's really similar. We have a lot of people, especially I'd say in the last 3 to 6 months, that have made hotel accounts for restaurants. So it's a completely different FEIN, which was the purpose of it. So they will actually track their daily activity for the restaurants. Again, this is outside of POS, because if it's one entity, keep it all under one. But for the restaurant, so it would probably be similar importing that Storage Commander data, that nightly file feed.
Well, it's a FEIN that matches our main entity. Like it doesn't have like a baby FEIN number. It's just part of the main
Yeah. We'd probably have to look at that as far as the setup goes, because you can run dual reports, but be without daily activity portion. I don't know how they would support that.
I mean, we
Um,
don't import anything else into the main entity. We only import into the baby entities currently.
okay. If you want to maybe just send me what entity
Like a
that is,
sample report. Yeah, sure.
yeah, and send me a sample of that and I can take a look.
Absolutely.
Requests for more training videos, we will definitely send a link out following the call for anyone that did register for the webinar. So we will get some helpful documents or helpful videos overview, especially ones that have a really good, high view watch rate. Send that over after the call.
Hey Kelsey, this is Jasmine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
I had a question. I know you mentioned dual brands. So I know we talked a while ago and we were trying to set that up. Is there somewhere in Inflow in the knowledge base I can look at to make sure that our dual brand is set up the way we want to, or do I need to like talk to someone to do that?
So for the dual brand, what we do is internally we have a little checkbox that says dual brand, and then it will accept and look for two different sets of data. It's not open yet, is it?
No, sorry, I thought you were asking.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. I was like, I don't think I've seen anything. So then we just need to know like what PMSs they each use, and then there really isn't visually for you anything different. The daily activity still looks the same, but instead of like just one hotel room count and one set of reports, it's going to look for two different sets. So it's going to literally add them together, make it look like one hotel, just because there are so many different expenses that are shared, and labor is shared, and people are shared. So one of the biggest things is they pretty much just treat it like one entity. You can still see the separate like PMS revenues to see how they each did, but ultimately it's treated just like one large location. So as you get closer, just reach out and say, hey, like this is the hotel. It's getting ready to open on this date, dual brand. They'll make sure they get those settings up in place. It's easier to get it set up sooner than later,
Okay.
just because there isn't a manual option for those. But yeah, just keep us in the loop on how that's progressing.
Yeah, how far out do you need notice? Because I'm assuming it's going to be open in October, hopefully.
Oh, I was saying like within a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're good. It's just the click of a button, just making sure that you all have the email address needed for both.
Got it. Okay.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Pritish with ABC Investments. How are you?
Hi, Pritish. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Hey, quick question. So on the vendor side in Inflow, um, if we set up our vendors and then I think we can set up contracts within the vendors with start dates and expiration dates. Is there a way that Inflow can notify us when the contract is expiring or we can write 60 days prior to expiration or whatever that field would be so we know.
Let me see. I think there what is in the vendor reports expiring contracts. So whether it expires in 30 or 60 days, I can see if this is an auto email report, but this is what that functionality would be.
Okay. If there's a way for Inflow to notify us without us running this report.
Don't see an email option. So probably when all the reports get updated to the 2.0 system, we'll definitely feed that in. So right now it would be something that you would manually run and maybe just set it like a to-do list for yourself to run it, the first or the last of the month, and you can select which one. But we can definitely make a note of that request to make sure that's on the list because it should definitely be something that you can set up.
Thank you.
So someone asked a question on labor management in the timesheets in labor. You have an employee that's under the status says approved, but all other associates are blank and don't know why. So in labor management, the team members have the ability to approve their timesheets from the time clock. So if you do have anyone that from the time clock, if they went to punch out or punch in, they have the ability to say like, yes, this is approved. So in here, if you do have the word approved, it doesn't really do much. It's more just for internal tracking. There isn't a way to remove it. It just means the employee from the time clock has approved their timesheet. one of the questions is related to vendor 1099s for the year. It's January 22nd. This is coming up real quick. So I know within the last year or so, actually within the last 2 years, the IRS has definitely asked for 1099s to be filed electronically. Tried to work with a couple people on getting what that file looks like, and no one's been able to do it. Everyone tends to be working with a third-party company. But in the vendor reports in accounting, and I'll walk through that again. I kind of sped through that real quick. So in the vendor reports is the vendor 1099 report. What you would do is you would select the 2024 calendar year. It's going to pull in anything that was paid during this time frame. What is the amount? I think it's $500. I could be wrong. Do you need to generate a 1096? You can, and then select the entities you want to run this for. Thanks, Danny. It's increased a little bit. And when you do run that, you can export that file. Majority of this information you can use to get it into an import format to file that. Again, you're supposed to create an account with the IRS. We never were successful in that because I didn't have the hotel's owner's specific information. But they are requesting this to be done electronically. So if it's something that you do not have with the IRS, there's a lot of third-party companies that are offering this service. And majority of the time, you'll get all of the information that you need within this vendor report. If you run your 1099 report and you're like, wait, someone is missing, I know I paid a contract salesperson or something. What you can do is you can go back into accounting, go into vendors, and then when you open up someone's vendor profile, well, this one's inactive. Let's go to this one. In the general tab is where you have that 1099 vendor selection. As soon as I toggle this on and I save the vendor page, if I come back into the report, it will account for anything that has been paid to that vendor. So if you do make any updates, you can easily go to the vendor profile, make those updates, and then rerun the report. Someone asked a question as far as repeating invoices, similar to repeating journal entries. Currently not the ability to set up reoccurring invoices. The reoccurring or repeating is what Inflow calls it. Right now, that functionality is only available for journal entries and bank transactions. So we'll definitely put that down, see where we are with that feedback request, and get that added for you. But yes, if you are not aware, 1099s are owed to the government by the 31st. So you've got about a week and a half. Any other questions? All right, well, as things start to slow down, Katie's got some training material. I also want to hear your ideas as far as future webinars as well. So if we try to do the open office hours, once a quarter, it's because people come back with a lot of different questions. Danny, the answer to your question is yes. So if you do have any future webinar ideas, please reach out to us. We have some big ideas, but we want to hear from you. It's more important than what we just assume we want to talk about. So any feedback you have on that, let us know. Danny, I'll send you training material on how to populate last year's actuals into the budget. A lot of people do that, especially when they're, first starting out, and you can then tweak it from there, but definitely. All right, Katie, you want to wrap up?
Yep, that sounds great. Thank you, Kelsey, for answering all of these great questions. And thanks everyone for coming to the call with great questions. We really enjoy the collaboration. I will be sending over, I've been making note of different things we've covered. So I will send a follow-up email that has the recording, all of the follow-up resources we covered, and the deck. To echo Kelsey's point, we would love to hear what you want to hear about for future webinars. We have some ideas, but would love to hear from you. And then in addition, if there's any modules you're not leveraging today or certain upgrades like advanced accounting and you do want to get a demo of them, I will also have a form in the follow-up email for you to express interest, and George and I will follow up with you. But we really appreciate you attending and spending part of your Wednesday with us. We do have one other question that came in.
Oh,
wrap up.
Like one on reports and modifying the reports, like Center report and such. If you want to just reach out to support, there is the ability to put the kind of like the center column of the operating statement. That's an internal setting. So if that is something that you want to get turned on, just reach out to the support team with additional clarification. Just say, hey, I was just on the last webinar, and I'll tell them to, hey, keep an eye out for anything that comes in from this so we can follow up with them on very quickly.
I also have one more question, Kelsey. Sorry. This is British. Mobile app. What's the status of that?
That is coming out very soon. Thanks, British. I did not pay you to say that. So we do have the facilities module that is getting ready to roll out in beta stage in February, March-ish. So with the facilities module, you have to have a mobile app. So those are going to come hand in hand. And then once that's out, we'll be adding additional modules to that. So very, very close to getting that up and out the door. So very exciting stuff when it comes to facilities. It's so funny, British. So with facilities, which is similar to Core, if anyone's familiar with that, want to get that out in beta first for people to test and really make some definitely upgrades to with the mobile app with that. And then the mobile app will also be available for accounting and labor management to make any of those changes on the fly. Danny, stop breaking your iPad. Notice some of the properties does not have the request PTO and other properties do not. If you have PTO policy, everyone should have the option to see that. So in the time clock, in the other services, they should be able to request PTO. For any reason, there isn't a role permission that tells you that you can't. So if Danny, if you have anyone that states that doesn't look like that, then just reach out and let us know. But there isn't a role permission that does not qualify for that. Some other upcoming exciting features is customizable dashboards. Hopefully they're okay with me throwing that out there. So those will be coming out over the next, I'd say like 2 to 4 months, hopefully, knock on wood. Where right now with the dashboard, you can see just very high level occupancy per day for the group of hotels, but you will have the ability to add in additional metrics and tools into that. So very, very close to that in 2025. So facilities, mobile app, and dashboard customization. And the product better deliver because I just put it out on the webinar for everyone to see.
And yeah, you just launched what our next webinar is going to be, which is facilities in February. And then hopefully in March, we're either going to do a showcase of all of the new rollouts that we've had over the past year, or we may focus on something new and upcoming. So we're definitely going to have some product focused webinars because I know there's a lot of curiosity around that. So keep an eye out for those Pendo cards and make sure to register.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your time today. It was great to see some familiar names and faces. Everyone take care. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.